The federal government is considering a restriction on the use and distribution of motorcycles and suspending mining activities in a bid to tighten the noose on terrorists. These were some of the resolutions reached at the 4th National Security Council meeting of the year held at the Presidential Villa State House, Abuja. Our correspondent Adesoa Morwa reports.
This has become commonplace in Nigeria. Heavily armed terrorists riding motorbikes, terrorizing citizens, kidnapping, and leaving behind destruction and deaths. Here at the 4th Security Council meeting for the year and the second in 2 weeks, authorities consider cutting off the source of funding and ability of terrorists to move freely.
So the essence of this press briefing is simply to give you an insight as to the issues that have been deliberated, as to the likely resolutions being anticipated, while the government is looking into the possibilities of addressing those issues as canvas. Issues associated with logistics of terrorists and bandits, issues associated with blockage of the funding, the source of funding, issues associated with the likely possibility of general suspension of mining activities, if indeed it is established, a nexus and connection is indeed established, and then the issues associated with consequences for dereliction of duty, if indeed any is established, arising from the report being expected and anticipated relating to the Kuje Correctional Center.
The Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation says terrorists have moved from the conventional ways of funding their activities to mining and ransom taking. He also discloses that the government is not unaware of the economic consequences of the proposed resolutions.
The new measures being taken by the criminals as it relates to terrorist funding and financing as it is today is embarking more on massive kidnapping for the purpose of ransom, and then as well embarking of massive mining activities among others. We have blocked conventional financing arrangement that was put in place by them before through the use of VVN, through the use of national identification numbers, and they have now shifted grounds. Any issue that at the end of the day will translate to threat corporate existence of a country requires for certain sacrifices. So regardless of the means that is being considered for perhaps a possible banning, provided what matters is a sacrifice that will see us through addressing the challenges associated, the security challenges, I think no sacrifice is too big.
It is not the first time the Nigerian government will claim to know the source of financing terrorists. While the government considers these resolutions, the question on the mind of many is, what will make the government to actually enforce a restriction on the use and distribution of motorcycles and the suspension of mining activities in the country? Adesoa Omoran, Arise News.
Right, thank you so much, Adesoa, for that great report there. I'll come back to the team in Abuja, Tundu and Dr. Bati. Dr. Bati, you could go first. Your thoughts on this?
Tundu?
Oh, he said you should go first.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear that. Okay, quickly. Well, first, let's deal with the issue of illicit international financial flow, which is a major problem in Africa and which has been identified as one of the sources of oxygen for terrorism, not just in Nigeria, but in Africa generally and even elsewhere in the world. So it's important, that the National Security meeting that was held yesterday, the Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami SAN, was talking about efforts that have been made to block, our financial flows to terrorists, because, well, it's when they have, a good supply of funds that they will be able to procure arms and ammunition, which in itself is a major problem within the sub-region, from Libya down to, West Africa. So that in itself is a good measure. But maybe that has not worked well enough. So yesterday, we were told that the National Security Council looked at a number of measures that can be further added to it. And then this novel idea that motorcycles will be banned, generally across the country. The second idea that was brought up had to do with, banning mining. Well, there was no specific detail in terms of the kind of mining that the federal government wants to ban and where. Is it generally in the country? Is it artisanal mining? Is it illegal mining in certain parts of the country? Because the argument, as articulated by the Attorney General, is that, look, through illegal mining, well, he didn't use the word illegal. Through mining, these terrorists get also funds, and all of that will need to be blocked. Okay, fine. The other leg of it is this focus on motorcycles. And a number of people may well worry, why motorcycles? You recall that when Zamfara State came out with a number of measures, motorcycle was part of the issue. The use of motorcycles were banned in 3 local governments, including a Safi local government that has been in the news. The state government said, look, you can't ride motorcycle. If anybody is found riding a motorcycle, it will be seized. Now, if you, in Katsina State, Governor Masari has also had cause to talk about the menace of motorcycles. The other day, when terrorists attacked the Kaduna airport, we were told that about 200 of them arrived on the back of motorcycles. So motorcycles have become quite notorious in Nigeria. But will banning motorcycles nationwide solve the problem of terrorism? That is the question to ask, because all kinds of measures have been adopted by government. Reviewing the security architecture, getting international support. Nothing has worked so far. The problem remains, even if government continues to claim that progress has been made. But when you ban motorcycles, one, you knock off a source of livelihood for some people. The Attorney General says there are just about 20% of the population. If out of 200 million people, 20% lose their means of livelihood, then of course they should be willing and ready to make that sacrifice. I thought I had him talking about sacrifice. Okay, 20% of 200 million motorcycle. What is the guarantee that these terrorists will not adopt other measures? What is the guarantee that they won't move to bicycles, and still continue to cause mayhem? The issue here is that, look, government has to continue to think creatively about what to do, not necessarily taking a source of livelihood for some people, because it's not everybody that rides motorcycle that is a terrorist. In a country where the economy is in the doldrums and many people don't even have a basic source of livelihood, and transportation is a problem, and motorcycles serve also as a means of transportation in a country where the airlines are problematic, the trains are not accessible, and the roads are not safe either. But this administration is already on its way out. It has a few more months left. Whoever becomes president of Nigeria next year will still inherit the same problem, and will still be here worrying about whether the new menace will be the use of bicycles or terrorists, on foot, causing problems.
Well, it does seem like rather a blunt instrument to use to address this problem with regards to mining and the banning of motorcycles. As you said, Dr. Abati, with regards to mining, we have to wait for the fine print. But at a time when Nigeria is in desperate need of bolstered revenue at this point in our national life, trying to shut off one of the possible taps where we can actually make some kind of revenue, it might be counterproductive, but let's wait and see the fine print. It is worrying that mining is a form of terrorist financing. With regards to the ban on motorcycles, if we take Zamfara perhaps as a pilot case, how effective was that ban in Zamfara? The residents of Zamfara were put through untold hardship. Speaking of sacrifices, which yes, the Attorney General did mention, they made sacrifices. Mobile telecommunications was also banned in Zamfara with the aim of stopping or curbing terrorism. To what effect? That was never really published. No kind of comprehensive report was shared with the public to show how effective that was, if in fact it was a pilot scheme or not. Or is this just the federal government throwing everything they can think of at the problem and trying to see what sticks? I'm not quite sure what kind of forensic research has gone into this. And that just tends to be a pattern here. We know the problems that brought about that idea, that policy of border closure, but that too seemed to me at the time like a blunt instrument. And because we have never had a comprehensive report talking about the efficacy or otherwise of that rather extreme policy, then questions linger. This idea of this small percentage of the public who make a living with their motorcycles having to sacrifice sounds good on paper, but the practical reality of it is that if those people are sacrificing their livelihood, they're not going to starve. They might also look to petty crime to feed themselves and their family. Petty crime, if we're lucky, they might end up, on the more extreme end of the criminal spectrum. So I think a lot more thought needs to be put into this and shared with the public, if at all more thought has been put into it, beyond this sort of very broad strokes that we've heard so far. Rufai.
You made there, and I'll just piggyback on your point as regards empirical research. I don't think there's enough empirical research as regards this knee-jerk reaction. It's another knee-jerk reaction, and I'm happy, Tunde, you talked about the telecoms ban. What was the effect? Nothing. You just stifled the livelihoods of people, took their livelihoods away, hurt them so much, created more poverty in the state, and in the end, you canceled the ban and life went back to normal. The Okada ban in those 3 local governments in Zamfara, what was the effect? Nothing. So it's just a knee-jerk reaction that is not empirically thought through. What are the empirical analyses as regards this? Have we even done an on-the-ground assessment, a needs assessment to the problem? Have we taken a holistic view to the problem of insecurity in Nigeria? Straight off the bat, I can tell you some things that people have posited. The fact that you don't even have enough boots on the ground. We need to employ more soldiers. We need to employ more police. 400,000 police is not sufficient for a population of 16 million people. You need to put more boots on the ground. How do you do that? People have been advocating state police. Let me tell you the empirical proof of that state police will work. We've seen the giant strides made by Amotekun in some parts of the Southwest. Although there's been some negativity too as regards that. I'm not going to exonerate that in the spirit of balance. But we've seen the giant stride they've made. Put more boots on the ground. How much have we done as regards, empirical analysis of the problem? And secondly, blocking terrorist financing. We saw stories, I've got people that are financing terrorists that were mentioned in some other jurisdictions like Dubai. What was done to them? What's going to be the future of this terrorist rehabilitation program that the terrorists keep coming back to hurt all of us? We all see how people got out of prisons in Kuje and the likes. I'm happy to talk about the ban and the border closure. What did it afford us? Nothing.
Right.
So it is time for us to go back, sit down, and empirically analyze the problem and bring solutions forward.
Right.
Not this ban on motorcycles.
Thank you, Rufai. That's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Michael Wilson to give us updates on global business activities. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Moving on to global business update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. The end of a messy week, really. So things are fairly mixed as far as the Asian markets are concerned. Japan inflation up very, very slightly. Hong Kong Hang Seng up 0.1%. Shanghai down about 0.3%. China has fined their ride-hailing giant Didi more than $1 billion for breaking data security laws. That includes data security and personal information protection laws. The CyberNet's announcement did not say, though, whether that meant that the fine would stop being able for Didi to add new users or indeed continue or increase or restore, actually, I should say, its presence in app stores in China. So, as I said, Japan's inflation stays above the Bank of Japan's target for a straight month. It sort of challenges the view that inflation in that country will remain somewhat temporary, even though households, of course, are worrying about rising costs as they are elsewhere in the world. Sri Lanka, just further news on that, and it's not good. Unfortunately, according to the central bank governor, inflation will hit 70%. At least they're getting together, it looks like, some kind of administration that the IMF to talk to. But food inflation in June, and this is the problem with inflation, it hits the poorest in society. Food inflation is up a staggering 80% in Sri Lanka right now. It's climbed up 25 points over the past month. The current economic crisis is, according to the central bank, an opportunity to wipe out the flaws of the past. Well, it may well do, but it's got a lot of negotiating with the IMF to do at the moment. Here's some interesting news out of Turkey. Now, what's been happening there is that Erdogan has been hosting a meeting about grain, and the outcome, according to Turkey, is that it may be that the Ukraine can resume its grain exports through the Black Sea. There are many moving parts in all this, it has to be said, but the agreement is going to be signed today between Ukraine, Russia, Turkey, and the UN. The world shortage of Ukrainian grain has meant, since Russia's invasion, has left millions at the risk of hunger. It may be that this is a push to 20 million tons of grain stuck in silos in Odessa. Meanwhile, Ukraine has been keen to say that Russia is actually looting £500 million worth of steel from its plants and ports in Ukraine. Again, that was supposed to be headed for Europe. So let's turn our attention to the United States, and really it was about Nasdaq actually. The Nasdaq futures sliding on the result of Snap not doing particularly well, the social media company. Futures on the Dow Jones slipping about 36 points. Again, shares of Snapchat, parent company Alphabet, of course, plummeting slightly. Results weighed across other stocks, including Meta platform stocks, including Alphabet, Twitter, and Pinterest. Now, the European Central Bank, I didn't think it was a surprise, as I was telling you yesterday. However, this half-point rise to bring up interest rates, or the basic interest rate, to 0% was felt to be a bit of a surprise yesterday. I think much more interesting is this fragmentation or anti-fragmentation tool. The bottom line about that is, and it's particularly apposite because of the problems going through, for example, countries with lofty debt piles, for example, Italy at the moment, which, as you know, so investors have been keeping a keen eye on this. What does it actually mean? Does it mean that monetary policy will somehow be adjusted to the level of a debt pile within a country? Obviously, the ECB was late to raise this, and again, Italy is facing this enormous political crisis now. Mario Draghi resigned. The papers are saying this morning, using words like drowned, committed suicide, walked into a trap, creating political chaos, and so on. Speaking of political chaos, it looks like EU solidarity about gas cuts. Now, we do know that Nord Stream actually resumed, but again, Spain and Portugal, there's still plans within the EU to cut consumption by 15%. Spain and Portugal, for example, are saying, hang on a second, we weren't profligate with this. We're not going to cut our gas. It's all down to Germany. You want to play the games to be close with Russia, as you've been doing in over the years. I'm paraphrasing naturally, but I mean, this is what a lot of the nations are saying throughout Europe, and it's not well coordinated at all. As far as the UK is concerned, Tata Steel, which is threatening to close now one of the UK's biggest steel plants in Wales, in Port Talbot, unless the government gives it £1.5 billion to help it reach its emission target. It's affecting 8,000 people. 2 blast furnaces may well close there. As far as the UK Prime Minister race is concerned, there's now clear ground between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. Liz Truss is the one proposing there should be rapid tax cuts. She's proposing, if should she get into power, an immediate tax cut as soon as she gets into power. The jury's really out about this, as I keep saying, whether or not growth it's going to get better as a result of tax cuts and so on. It's not necessarily true. An old professor of mine at King's College in London was on the radio this morning saying it's not. He'd be recommending further interest rate rises. I mean, that's an open question to which I suspect there is no answer. The only answer is actually what happens, rather than looking back to the past, where it's felt that tax cuts sometimes work and sometimes don't. The worry is, of course, what it does to inflation. And finally, oil prices are higher as a result of of phone calls between Saudi and Russia, Saudi affirming Russia's performance to OPEC plus, and so we go on. It's making noises about rapidly approaching its own production ceiling. Anyway, make whatever sense of that you actually like. There have been phone calls. The bottom line is the oil price is rising today. That's the global view.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Wilson. We must dash.